There are a million web hosting companies. Let's talk about how to choose one. Dave Taylor here, and I want to talk about web hosting. Everyone has a website. Some people have more. I have 3, 4, at least 4 different websites. I actually kind of lose track after a while. So here's the deal. Netcraft in January of 2018 figured out that there are over 1.8 billion websites. Billion with a B. That's a lot of websites. And it turns out that there are over 300,000 web hosting providers. So that already gives me a bit of a headache. It's like, oh my gosh, how do you possibly choose when you have 300,000 different options and you're one of 1.8 billion websites out there? The answer is you take your time and you think about the core essential characteristics that you need for a good host. Now, before I go further, let me tell you there are some mighty big hosts out there. 1&1 hosts 6.7% of all websites. And then going down that list of top hosts is Squarespace, Hetzner Online, Bluehost, Liquid Web, HostGator, IBM Cloud, and GoDaddy. Between them, they represent, it's 10 to 15% of the overall internet. That's a lot. But here's the question. Do you really want to host at a site where there's a million other sites also there? Well, maybe, maybe not. So let's talk about the actual decision of how to figure out or how to evaluate different web hosting companies. And I'll tell you, it really comes down to the 3 S's, and those are speed, security, and support. Now, let's talk about nuts and bolts, and then we'll come back to those 3 S's. The first thing you need to figure out is what kind of server you want. And it ranges all the way from shared hosts to VPS to dedicated servers. Now, let's go back and let's talk about it. So a shared host is when you have a computer and it's hosting lots and lots of websites. Now, that's the least expensive option, and that's how most people have their sites hosted, right? If you go to somewhere like Bluehost or GoDaddy, then you're probably going to be on a shared server. And what that means is that you're competing for resources with everyone else that's on that same server. So if you and I are both on the same system and I suddenly get a mention in the front page of the New York Times, then I'm getting huge amounts of traffic, which is taking resources away from your hosting. So, one of the things to really look at is performance. And when you have shared hosting, your performance generally is, at least it's vulnerable to the traffic that the other sites on that server get. Moving up a level, VPS or virtual private servers. And that's kind of an interesting sort of hardware-software pairing there, because a VPS is something where it looks like you have your own server, but there's multiple VPSs running on an individual piece of hardware. Now, VPSs generally cost a little more, and the advantage is that you actually get a lot more flexibility. So if there's custom software you want to run, or you want an inventory database, and you want to make sure no one else is able to access your data set or your partition, a VPS can be good. Now, when you go up the food chain and you're someone like the New York Times, then you're on a dedicated server. You have your own physical hardware somewhere in a server room somewhere in the world. In fact, you probably have it mirrored or duplicated in multiple places, or you're using a content delivery network. We'll get back to those. And so that's a dedicated server. That's the most expensive. That's where you go from dozens of dollars a month to thousands of dollars a month. And, if you need it because you're getting 1 million visitors a day or something, then a dedicated server is a really good option. Now, next criterion you have to look at is you have to look at what software is included. And for most people, that's just about WordPress. And so if you're getting WordPress, then there's a bunch of other things that might come with it. An email management system. There might be like Shopify or another shopping backend. There might be support for specific kinds of plugins or different architectures. And there are dedicated WordPress hosting companies. So I've used some of those too, right? So their focus is we just want to work with people running WordPress. Now, since that is a significant percentage of the overall number of sites on the web, which is pretty impressive actually, then that might be you. You might be someone looking for some company that really focuses on WordPress. Now, the next things you have to worry about are, going back now to that New York Times, is you have to worry about disk space and bandwidth quotas. And I have had this bite me in the butt more than once, where I've been with a hosting company and everything's been really good, and then I've published an article and it's just gotten super popular, and suddenly they're saying, oh, you're over your bandwidth quota, we're gonna have to charge you another couple of $100. And it's just like, what? So why do I get a penalty for being successful? So really pay attention to those. You want to look for companies that have at least really good disk space quotas, so you have a lot of space. Remember, there's a lot of log files. There's a lot of stuff that goes on more sort of above and beyond your actual site. So there's a lot of back-end things that can eat up disk space. I know that I have one site that's over 5 gig of space on a drive, and I don't even know where all that space is going. But it's a lot of really big images. Actually, I do know where it's going. But, you know, this is the kind of thing where you need to make sure you are aware before you go to host your site, and then they come back and say, oh, well, we only give you 1 gig of space, and then it's $10 a month for each additional gig. And you're like, I need 5 gig, so I really need 6 gigs. So now suddenly I'm paying another $50 a month. That was not what I expected, right? Same with bandwidth. Be aware of your bandwidth needs. Look at it over the last 3 to 6 months if you're migrating a site, and then be really optimistic about how much traffic you might get, and make sure your hosting company can handle that. Now, another thing that's really important is file access methods. Whether you're using just WordPress or something else, you're still going to want to get to the back end. You're still going to want to be able to upload files and images and such, not always within the framework of WordPress. So there's access systems like SFTP, which is Secure File Transfer Protocol, or a really common one is cPanel, or there's a bunch of variants of that. I like cPanel. It can be a little clumsy because it's trying to solve everything for everybody, but it is pretty common. You want to have something like that, and you want to know what they use before you find out that you have to pay for their IT people to copy a file for you. That would be bad. And then there's the big B, backups. Now, backups are super important because people's sites get hacked all the time. And I've had my sites attacked, I've had all sorts of problems, and I can tell you, it's very, very rarely someone sitting in their office or basement trying to get to your site. Nowadays, it's really all bots. It's really all automated software attacking thousands or tens of thousands of sites at the same time. So don't feel like you're being picked on, but you really, really want backups because you really want to be able to say, oh my gosh, where's my home page? I need to roll back a week before any of this bad stuff happened. And that's super important. And I would tell you, check how reliable the backups are, because I had a very sad situation many, many years ago where I actually had my own server and I was hosting other companies and it was going really well, and a hacker came in and wiped out my system. And then I found out that my co-location facility's backups weren't actually working. They were saying they were doing daily backups and weekly full backups, but sadly none of them worked. None. So I lost customer data, and that was really awkward. That's when I said, you know what? I don't want to be in the hosting business. So now I hire other companies to host for me. So that's way, way less stress. But backups are super important, and obviously security is really important. That's one of those 3 S's, right? Now, another thing to think about is email settings and mailboxes. If you want to have your web hosting company also host email addresses for you, and even if it's just a redirect or forward, you want to be able to be like dave@askdavetaylor.com, even if I might not have any actual mailboxes on the Ask Dave Taylor actual hosting server, right? So make sure your company can do that kind of stuff, your hosting company. Okay. We're almost down. I have this long list of things to check out, right? So another one to look at is site analytics. You really want to be able to get some analytics about how your site's doing, not just Google Analytics. And frankly, some people don't really want Google getting all that data on their site. But however you feel about that, Google Analytics are good, but you want actual hosting server analytics too, because they're looking at different things. They're looking at, for example, your bandwidth day by day. So you can look at, oh, every Monday morning I seem to get vastly more bandwidth needs than any other time during the week. Why could that be? And you can sort of work backwards and figure out what's going on. Or if they say, oh, you're way over quota, you can go back and say, well, where did that happen? What occurred here? What days caused this? You know, maybe what files are actually suddenly being uploaded and downloaded that's causing me to use all my disk quota, right? All that sort of stuff. And back to security, you want a company that's really managing security on their hosting service, because there are all these bots and all these bad guys and all this malware, all just, I just see it as like, you know, in like sharks pecking and chewing at this, I don't know, floating web host, right? And you have to have a vigilant host company because you probably don't have the expertise to manage all of this. Now, there are security plugins you can get for things like WordPress, and you absolutely should, and you should install them. This is why things like two-step verification is really good, if you can install something like that. But the hosting company needs to be managing security too. So that's something you really want to ask them. And speaking of security, it's been at least a year and a half. All your sites should be running on secure SSL. Right? So you should no longer have HTTP, you should all have HTTPS. Google has said a long time ago now that they will prioritize secure sites because they believe that's important, whether or not you're selling stuff, whether or not you have forms on your site. So look for a hosting company that has SSL certificates and can help you install them, because that's really important. Okay. That's a lot to look at, right? And then there's speed. I talked about speed as one of the 3 S's, but I haven't quantified that. The way to check speed is to actually go to websites that are hosted on that server. And the super easiest way to do that is to look for the hosting company's site and see how fast it is. If you go to a hosting company and their homepage is slow to load, that's not a great sign. You really want to have something where you're like, wow, how on earth is that so fast? That's what I want. I want my site to be super fast. If nothing else, Google has come out and very clearly said, you need super fast hosting, because if your pages serve up slowly, you will eventually go lower and lower and lower in the search results. That is not good. And then support. So that's the 3rd S of our 3 S's, right? You want companies that have 24/7 support. You know, I have one hosting company that I work with on a small site, and it's just a guy. And I know that sometimes he goes on vacation, sometimes he's taken the weekend off. I know that, I anticipate that, so that's okay. But if I'm using a site where this is part of my business or it's really important to me, then I want 24/7 support. And I don't want to just have phone support. I like chat support personally. Email support is good. If I send an email, what I like to see is have it automatically issued a trouble ticket, so it goes into their support system. And then hopefully within a few minutes, I'll get at least an initial response from a first level person saying, we understand, we categorize, we see what's going on, we're rebooting your server, we know there's an issue, or can you give me more details? So you know someone's managing it. It might escalate up. Sometimes the problems that we have can be pretty darn complicated, and that's a drag. So, those are the 3 S's: speed, security, and support. So we talked about all of those. So you also need to know your pricing plans. And I gotta say, hosting companies are all over the map. And what they really want you to do is they really want you to sign up for the long term. So I've been doing this video in cooperation with a company called Hostinger, and they're a hosting company, and this is why they asked me to talk about hosting. And I thought, let's look at how they do things. So real quick, Hostinger starts out with really inexpensive entry point of $1.45 a month. And you can see here on this slide that there's the 3 different web hosting plans. The premium shared hosting's a pretty good deal. At $2.95 a month is pretty, minimal cost. And that gives you an unlimited number of websites, unlimited email accounts, unlimited bandwidth, 2x processing power. I don't know what that means versus regular. and weekly backups. So there's a lot going on in that package. You can move up to business shared hosting, and how do you decide which of these tiers to go in? Well, you want to sort of have this sort of optimistic best case scenario of your site getting a lot of traffic and selling a lot of products and being really successful. You don't ever want to set up your hosting based on things going poorly, because honestly, why are you in business? Why do you have a website if you're being so pessimistic? Come on, be more positive. So, look at that and say, what's my best case scenario? And I will say, I believe in never going to the cheapest possible solution. Always move up at least one level, because it makes a huge difference in how you were treated by customer service. It can often make a big difference in the performance of your site once it's hosted there. So all of that's really important. But let's drill in just a tiny bit more on this premium hosting, because I want to illustrate how so many hosting companies have these sort of tricks that they play. I mean, tricks probably not fair. How they try to, they really want you to commit for the long term. So if you look at the way they have the premium shared hosting, it's $6.95 a month for your minimum possible 3 months, right? But if you go up and you commit to 2 years, right? Well, no, 12, 24, 4 years, sorry. If you commit to 4 years of hosting right now, then you can drop that price down dramatically to under $3 a month. Now, that's really pretty darn good pricing, and I understand from Hostinger's perspective, it is a huge benefit to them to be able to actually commit customers for the long term. That's really a great way for them to be able to manage their business and for them to offer better service, which then is good for you. But, 4 years, that's a long time, right? So maybe you want to start something smaller. Now, they recognize that's an issue, so they actually have a 30-day money-back guarantee. But let's be honest, it is a pain in the booty to actually migrate a server or migrate a website over to a new server. So the number of people that give up after 30 days, I'm sure, is fairly small. So this is an example of what I would do. Is I would probably go for something like 6 months or a year. And then if things are going really well, a couple of months into it, then go back to their customer service people and say, I love you guys. Can I bump up to that 4-year plan, and can we prorate things and see how we can make this work? Most hosting companies I know would be thrilled to have you come along and say, oh my gosh, yes, we love you just as much as you love us, and that's wonderful. Now, here's a really cool thing, is if you look in the description on this video, I have a 15% discount code. So that $2.95 a month goes down even more. So that's a pretty good deal. But again, Hostinger, I don't host a site on their server, so I am just talking about what they present. And they are a great example of one of the 300,000 hosting companies out there. Are they big? Are they small? Do they have a skyscraper in downtown Berlin? Who the heck knows, right? At some level, it doesn't really matter. In fact, a lot of hosting companies end up using servers that are run by other hosting companies. And that's okay, because it's really that personal touch. It's really having someone help you make sure your site is running, stays running, and is secure. And that's really what matters. So this has been a really long discussion. I hope it's been really helpful. When you're going to choose your web hosting company, be slightly skeptical about what you read on one site. So go and do a little cross comparison. And honestly, in my opinion, the very best way to find a good hosting company is to talk to other people. Social media is great for this. I posted something on Facebook, and within 24 hours, I had 30 or 40 people telling me about their favorite hosting service and why. And that was great information, because really, we can just absorb all sorts of stuff and go and read 1.8 billion websites worth of hosting information. But to have 2 or 3 of your friends or colleagues say, we're here, here's how much we pay, and here's the experience we have, that is invaluable. So talk to people, find out where people are hosting things. If you're interested, check out Hostinger. And that's all I got for you. So be careful out there and pick a great web hosting company, because it really makes things much more fun. And with that, I'll catch you in my next video.